Hello summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides video. My name is Nathan Ng and we'll be talking about the 5 things that can instantly help you become a better laner. League is a pretty complex game. Even when you play the simplest of champions, there are so many other mechanics and concepts to grasp that it can be pretty hard and difficult to know where to even start to improve. And that's where this video comes in. Obviously, you aren't going to be able to suddenly be able to climb to Challenger after watching it, and that can only be done from hard work and dedication. But it should definitely be able to help you make immediate improvements and help you be a lot more impactful in your games and get you on the right track to reaching your goals as a player. The first big thing that we're going to be covering is wave management. No matter what lane you play, this is an absolutely crucial skill that you have to pick up. When you're on the weaker side of the laning matchup, there's usually not much you can do about your opponent shoving you in. But the one thing that you can do is prevent yourself from accidentally shoving the lane to your opponent. This mostly happens when somebody wants to go for a last hit on a minion and they use an AoE spell to do so. Even a single cast can cause the wave to slow push in the wrong direction. Let's say that you're playing a relatively weak early laner like Aatrox. If your opponent is a champion that can either poke you hard for moving up to CS like Quinn or Teemo, or somebody with a super strong early all-in like Darius, you're completely screwed if you give them a freeze. Trying to move up to break up a freeze or even just attempting to get a single last hit on a minion can lead you to take a huge chunk of damage or even dying. To prevent that scenario, the somewhat oversimplified solution is just to understand that sometimes you have to give up some CS and accept the experience as a consolation prize. Another thing for preventing freezes is shoving in the wave as quickly as you can if your opponent goes for a reset. If you just sit there last hitting, you're inevitably just going to slow push back to your opponent and eventually they can make a freeze out of that, since they can just bully out of the wave once it gets past the halfway point. Now let's look at the flip side of the coin. It's not just when you're on a weaker laner that wave management benefits you. When you're on the stronger one, managing the wave the right way is a much safer, consistent way to win that lane. A lot of people play the same cookie cutter way when they're the lane bully. They consistently go for super aggressive trades any chance that they get. This would definitely be oppressive if we lived in a world where top lane was just a 1v1. But top lane isn't always just a 1v1. It's a pretty common place for junglers to path from bottom half of the map upwards. You may think it's up to your jungler to be there to bail you out of an inevitable gank, but that's not always easy. Your jungler's clear speed may be a little bit slower than the enemy's, or they may have a different route in mind for whatever reason. Either way, whether they're unable to, or just not planning on coming, you're the only one responsible for how that lane plays out. So when you're constantly shoving in the wave and the enemy jungler shows up, you're caught out of position in the open, and you usually won't be able to make it back to your turret alive. Then you get a tense pitch against you in the top lane, and then you end up losing your lane, blaming jungle gamp, and then losing yet another game because of the lack of good fundamentals. That entire situation can be changed by focusing on using CS as a measure of winning the lane, rather than just going for kills or bullying out your opponent back to base, which could be a viable strategy as well, just gotta make sure when you use it. The exact way to set up a freeze varies based on where the lane actually is. The general rule is that the closer you are to your tower, the more enemy minions you'll need to hold that freeze, since your next set of minions will reach the minion pile that much quicker. If you want to dive deeper into this concept, I recommend watching one of our videos specifically aimed at it. And of course, if you're still hungering for more knowledge afterwards, you could always head over to ProGuides.com. We have courses from all your favorite streamers and pros like Core JJ, Afremu, and Xmithy to really help you understand how to play your role. And if you want a more personalized experience, we have coaches available 24/7, ready to help you guys become the best. Our coaches are top tier players that have spent years climbing the solo queue ladder to get where they are now, and they're ready to share everything that they've learned with you. Now let's get back into the video, shall we? On a note closely related to wave management, we have a much simpler concept of knowing when to take a reset. For some reason, a lot of players have an obsession of farming up as much as they can, staying in lane as long as possible, and pinging their gold to show it off. But that's just nonsense. You should be a lot more eager to reset. There are a couple of other different reasons to go back to base. The first and most obvious is to buy items. But you obviously don't want to just go back constantly just to buy components over and over again. Instead, you should be focused on making your recalls about items that serve as a big power spike in lane. But don't just think about your big spike, think about what your opponent is going for as well. Camille or Ezreal may want to buy Sheena on the first back, while a tank top would go for Bramble Vest or Bombies. Meanwhile, Riven ideally wants an Iron Spike Whip. Most ADCs go for Noon Quiver. And if it's a mage, they really want to farm up to Lost Chapter. If you're one of the champions that just wants to grab Sheen, you should go back the second you hit 700 gold, so that way you can use your cheaper spike to get a bigger lead on your opponent. On the other side of the coin, if you're a champion with more expensive back, like Bombies or Lost Chapter, you should try to let your opponent stay in lane longer. Obviously, you can't literally force them to stay. If they want a back and recall, they probably will. But oftentimes, if you keep shoving the waves into your opponent's tower, they'll be baited by the thought of losing the CS and stick around for an extra wave. Another good example of when to go for a reset is if you want to take an all-in on your opponent. This could loosely be applied to a lot of champions, but it's specifically important for snowbally early strong laners, like assassins and burst mages. Since champions like that really want to take a lead fast, it's a bad feeling to go for it all in the second you hit level 6 and fail to kill your opponent. Now you have to wait an entire ultimate cooldown to try again. Instead of forcing with a single Doran's Blade or a longsword, go back for Serrated Dirk or Sorcerer's Shoes beforehand. Trust me, that extra pen is a huge damage amp and can make all the difference in how your attempt goes. The same logic applies later on in the laning phase as well. If your ultimate is up, but you have your mythic sitting in base, you may as well go back to ensure that your next ultimate is a guaranteed kill. The next big skill that you want to develop is communicating and cooperating with your junglers. Yes, working with your team is technically a part of laning. League of Legends is a team game after all. While I did previously say that you can't always rely on a jungler to bail you out of a bad situation, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't always make the effort to work with them. And this can mean a lot of things. Maybe you're out of mana, and your opponent keeps shoving wave after wave. Not only does this lead to a CS deficit as you inevitably lose out on some minions to the tower, but it also lets your opponent take plates, since you can't even use spells to punish them. In an instance like that, call your jungler to come and shove out the wave so you can go ahead and go for a reset. Another super valuable use for your jungler is calling for dives. This one ties in with our first point of learning how to manage waves. If you hold a freeze for a long time, it'll eventually end up building a slow push. If you can coordinate with your jungler to go for a dive right as you have that huge stacked minion wave crashing into their tower, that's a huge win. Even if you trade 1 for 1, your team gets 450 gold due to the assist. And then they're missing out on all that golden experience from the minions dying. And nothing feels worse than seeing a ton of minions dying to your tower while you can't do anything about it. Trust me, pulling off this tactic is pretty easy to do, but it has a huge consequence for the person being dove, so it's definitely something that you want to implement. Just make sure that you guys don't go 0 for 2, and they get the minion wave anyway. The last thing to do with cooperating with your jungler is to have them help you with vision. This could be useful for any laner, but it's especially useful for top laners. The shorter mid lane is just generally safer overall, while bottom lane has 2 people to keep trinkets down. But as a solo laner top, it's not possible to really keep that vision up to guarantee that you never die to ganks. So ask your jungler to help you out with a control ward or yellow trinket if they still have it. On the topic of working with your jungler, we have a question of the day. Do you think it's on the laners to play around the jungler or vice versa? This is probably a pretty controversial question. Obviously, you're gonna want to play for yourself in solo queue, but in an ideal world, what do you think is the right way for the game to be played? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Now let's get back on topic, shall we? The fourth point that we have is adding new champions to your pool. I know that the champion you pick technically doesn't have anything to do with your actual skill as a laner, but it does directly affect how the lane plays out, so we're gonna talk about it. When it comes to drafting, it's really important that you don't open yourself up to counter picks. There are some champions that are super strong, even S-tier picks that are completely useless when countered. So when you find yourself first picking, it's important that you have a champion that's safe to blind pick. This means a champion that either doesn't have any real hard counters in lane, like Jhin, or a champion that is useful when behind, like Malphite. Aside from having safe blind picks, you also want to try and have champions from different classes you play, so you can go ahead and have your own counter picks as well. Let's say you're a top laner that only plays AD bruisers and carries top. What do you do if your opponent picks Malphite? Or if you're the type to exclusively play tanks? How do you ever deal with somebody that rolls tanks, like Darius or Alawi? Our first 4 points are all sort of macro or strategy based. For our final one, let's take a look at the micro skill that can definitely help you become a better laner. Trading. Learning to trade better and more efficiently will immediately make you a much better player. But that's also a pretty broad subject. Trading could mean a lot of different things. Hitting skill shots, comboing cleaner, and all sorts of other things fall under that umbrella term. But the mechanical side of trading isn't something that I can help you with. That's something that you have to work on by yourself with practice. But one small but super important tip I can give you that you can apply right now is learning to pressure your opponents when they try to farm. This doesn't mean threatening to go for an all-in. It's as simple as moving up for an auto or a spell every time your opponent tries to go up for an attack animation on a minion. An auto attack may be a small frame of time, but it's still a window where you can freely land damage on them where they can neither dodge nor retaliate. I know this may seem like a pretty obvious thing, but it's something the vast majority of players definitely aren't actively trying to do, or sometimes they forget about it. Try to always be mindful of when your opponent is punishable, and you'll definitely see a trend in coming out of your lane ahead more often. And that wraps things up for our 5 ways to instantly become a better laner, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you follow and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on any of our content. Remember, let us know whether junglers should play around their laners, or laners should play around their junglers down in the comments below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below, where you can discuss League further or just hang out and be part of the community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.